In today's episode, we have Matthew Mason with us, and he is going to talk on how to use visual models to craft the perfect offer from creation to marketing. You will also get to hear the 4 keys to picking a topic for your online course, how to niche down into a market for you to target, and the visual models that will catapult your business into amazing success. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the Online Course Igniter podcast, where you'll hear from successful course creators and how they were able to turn their passion into a thriving online business empire. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the podcast today. I have our guest with us, Matthew Mason from Superb Learning, and we've been talking off and on a little while now, and I've got to know Matt a little bit. It's really great talking to him because he has a cool take on creating online courses that helps you kind of figure out the models and the frameworks of your course so that when you present that information to the students, it's really giving them something to attach to, something that they can focus on and achieve the goals that they're going for. So it's a pleasure to have you on the show today, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm great. It's really good to be here. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is going to be a great episode, something a little different than what we've talked about in the past, and something that I think is really beneficial and helpful for all of our online course creators out there. But let's go ahead and start before you got into teaching this and this type of business that you're in now. What were you doing before you got into online business and online courses? And then how did you get into this world?
That's always an interesting story. I used to work in the racing industry, so I used to work riding thoroughbred horses, breaking and educating and pre-training thoroughbred horses. So that was going back probably 22 years ago now. I was at the time was actually doing that work in Japan. Came back from Japan and found out that there was a school here in Brisbane, Queensland, Australia, that was teaching Japanese students how to work with horses. Thought, that wouldn't be a bad spot to live, and applied for a job and got a job. And that's it. That was sort of where it all started. And then I was there teaching them how to ride and stuff, and then got asked to step into the classroom. And then the resources that they gave me were very, very thin and ordinary. And so they said, well, can you build something better? So that really started me down the path of instructional design and developing training resources. At the time, it wasn't in the online space. It was still very much print-based material and PowerPoints. But yeah, that evolved over time, and we started to move into looking at online capabilities. And then I left there and moved to becoming a training manager for a mortgage company. And that was then where I really sort of started moving. I implemented a Moodle LMS, and that was sort of, I think it was Moodle 1.8. That was how old it was, and I was using a tool called Captivate, but to develop the online training resources. That at that time it was actually Macromedia Captivate. It's now owned by Adobe, and that really just started me down that path of developing online resources. And then about 9 years ago, I went, you know what? I need some bit more variety. So I stepped out on my own, set up my own business, and continued to us developing primarily, initially in the corporate market, but more lately working with the solopreneurs and the small to medium businesses. What I refer as heart work, not hard work. Working with some of these solopreneurs and things that are doing some great work, having huge impact on people and what they're doing. And gives us a great purpose knowing that we're helping them to get their knowledge out there to create some great learning experiences that are going to help to impact other people.
Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, that's a great story. And you can see when people think back, 5, 10, 20 years of their life, you can see the trajectory that got them to where they are now. The fact that you started teaching racehorsing, and through the classroom, through learning the skills of helping students and education and things like that, that evolved over time and brought you to where you are today. And I always like to hear these stories for that reason. So 9 years ago, you decided, okay, I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to try to create my own business around this information. Was that teaching people instructional design, or were you creating resources for people? What did that early business look like?
Yeah, so the early business was me working as an instructional designer, developing online resources and still, in the early stages, print resources as well. But yeah, developing resources for clients, and that was a mix of large corporates, government departments, etc., and some small to medium enterprises as well. But yeah, initially it was developing programs for them. And then eventually we went, you know what, we should probably start developing our own courses as well.
Okay, very cool. And when you started that business in the early days, how were you getting clients through the door? Did you already have people that you knew through some of the work you had already been doing, or was this a new venture where you had to go out and start making new contacts?
A lot of it was a new venture. I was lucky at the time. I was doing some work with a training organisation. Sat down with the manager and I told him basically that I'd made a decision to leave and go out on my own. And obviously, I was doing some great work for them. They didn't want to lose me, so he said, "Okay, well, we'll become your first client." So that was really good. And then from that, it was just going out and making connections, meeting new people, and a lot of it in the early stages was also through referral. So that was obviously I'd been out in the market as well even while I was working for other people. I was still out networking and meeting people and things like that. So yeah, it was good. A lot of it was referrals in the early stages, which was great. It was a bit of a double-edged sword though as well, because getting lots of referrals, I didn't actually need to go chasing the work and didn't need to do a great deal of marketing. That's always a challenge, because then if the referrals slow down or that sort of work's not there, then if you haven't been doing any marketing, then you're going to be in a bit of a sticky situation.
Right, it's a whole new world, isn't it?
It is, yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So, in the beginning, you're doing these corporate jobs and these government contracts, and then you said later on you started branching out to smaller, medium sized business solopreneurs. About how long ago did you start making that transition?
We started making that transition about 2 years ago. We'd had a couple of people along the way. We had one guy that was a chiropractor that had a sort of slightly different methodology around how he was helping people with their back problems, and we helped him develop a program around that, and a few other small and sort of sat back and looked, and you know what, they were the ones that we really enjoyed doing. That was really good because we had a good connection with the decision maker, whereas with the corporates, we could go in and we could sort of suggest that we can do this, this great experience, but things would have to sort of, the decision maker was generally sort of 3 to 4 steps up from the people we're dealing with, and didn't necessarily always end up being the best learning experience that we felt could be done. But because of the sort of decisions in the organisation, that's what it was. So yeah, we thought, okay, now we want to start working more with the small and medium businesses, the solopreneurs, and help them create the impact.
Okay, so instead of going through these different levels of hierarchy and creating this content for these big wide corporations, you found it useful to be able to speak directly to the people who were running the businesses, the business owners, the entrepreneurs, the chiropractors, and people like that.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, much easier. We can pitch an idea on what the experience could look like or feel like. And that was it. We knew we were dealing directly with the decision maker, but also as well what they were actually putting out there in terms of their courses and content. Like a lot of the stuff we were doing in the corporate was a lot of very much compliance based type things or soft skills training. We sort of would question whether or not there was a huge impact that they were having. Whereas, we did some work with one lady who had written a book and a program that was all around healthy eating for children, and we helped her develop the online course that was then going into childcare or daycare centres, teaching them how to prepare healthy meals for children with the idea of improving the diets of young children. So when you look at that compared to helping a corporate develop a program that is around health and safety or compliance or something that I suppose a lot of the organisation don't necessarily perceive as being huge value, then we can see much greater impact with helping someone to actually educate others in how kids can have better diets.
Yeah, that's cool. You're having that direct impact to these people, and you're seeing the fruits of that labor probably pretty immediately too, which is really cool. So then you said you're helping others create programs, and you're doing design for others, and then you got to a point where you said, okay, you decided you needed to start creating your own material. So did you come to a point where you thought to yourself, maybe I should create my own learning curriculums so that people can learn how to design better programs for themselves? Is that what it looked like?
Yeah, yeah. Initially, we started developing some training programs, more focused, very much focused on instructional design, and some others around some of the tools that traditional instructional designers would use. So the software and tools that they'd use. And then lately, we've been more focused on again helping courses for those solopreneurs, or what we're now referring as edupreneurs, the educational entrepreneurs, and helping them to help them. So courses around, how do they unpack their intellectual property? How do they nail their niche? What is their target market? But then also some things around how do you do YouTube ads? How do you do a Facebook Live? How do you do, Facebook groups? So those mix of different courses and things that those edupreneurs are going to need to be able to support them to get their knowledge out there in the world.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, let's go ahead and start diving into some of that content that I wanted to ask you about. We'll start at the beginning. I want to really dive into what we were talking about earlier about your frameworks and the models that you help people create, because I think that's pretty fascinating. But like you said, you got to start at the beginning for the new people who are listening out there, for the ones who don't have a course yet or they're still trying to find their footing. What are some of the first pieces of advice you give to someone who maybe they're an expert at a skill, or maybe they have a business and they would like to create an educational content, but like you said, picking your niche, coming up with the content, how do you go about that specifically?
Yeah, so I suppose it's really four key things that we look at there. Obviously, there's a thing around what is your expertise in. So, you could be in marketing or sales, for example, that's your expertise. But then also then looking at, well, where's their passion? Because, while people have probably got expertise in a number of different things, you can probably drill down and look at, well, where's the real passion in that? And then from there going, okay, well, what are the problems that are out there that you can solve? Or what does the world need? What are the problems that you can solve that there's a mix of that takes your expertise and your passion? And what are those big problems that can be solved? And what are those problems that people are willing to pay for? And really focusing on those four factors. And that will sort of drill down into that sort of entrepreneurial sweet spot, because then you're delivering content, you're teaching people about something that your expertise in, that you've got passion in, that they need a problem solved and that they're also willing to pay for. So that's the first thing, and then I suppose, then obviously when you're looking at, well, what does the world need? What do people need? Then going, okay, well, what's the market? What's the niche that you're going to target into, and sort of really sort of narrow down so that you have a good niche, rather than sort of going, okay, I'm going to try and be an expert to everyone. Target a specific niche. So, for example, you might be, someone that's in sales, but then maybe your passion is really in dealing with objections, or maybe it's to do with, closing the sale or something like that. And then you find a lot of people would have problems with closing the sale. But then you go, okay, well, who am I going to help? And maybe it might be a niche in a specific industry, or it could be specific target of people, and really get those things. So once you've got, you know who you're serving, and the problem you're solving, from that, then you can start to think about, well, what does this actually look like, and what is it I need to teach people as part of that experience.
Lovely. I love this. I know that me and you have talked in the past and have communicated, but I don't think we've ever shared our philosophies on some of this stuff. But I'm very in tune with what you're saying, because I believe a lot of the same things. When looking at that market, that niche that you want to tackle, you hit on the same points that I always teach, and that's your expertise, your passion, and I lump a third one, market demand, as kind of the two that you broke out as problems to solve and problems people will pay for. And I feel like I always see it as a Venn diagram where you need to be kind of in the center of the three, because you can have, there can be demand and expertise, but like you said, if you're not passionate about it, I feel like that's when people kind of burn out and they get tired and they move on to something different.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, definitely, and that's where we see people going and chasing shiny objects because they're going, oh, hang on, there's something else that's going to spark my passion, and if it's not there, yeah.
Right, right. And then, you could have all the passion in the world and you might be an expert at it, but if there's no problems or people aren't willing to pay for that, you're not going to end up anywhere. And if you have passion and people are paying for it, but you're not an expert in it, and an expert is loose because you just got to be good enough to teach the material, but people can tell when people are being fake. So if you obviously don't know what you're talking about, and you see this all the time, unfortunately, especially in marketing, people trying to teach things that they themselves don't really understand because they're chasing the money. They know that, this subject's going to make a lot of money, and I want to talk about it, but you can tell they're not really an expert in that field. That's a recipe for disaster, don't you think?
Oh, definitely, definitely. Yeah, there's a lot of those. Yeah, there's marketing, course creation as well, where they've been able to do some marketing quite well, or they've created a course that's been successful, and then they're going, "I'm going to teach everyone." And it's like, hang on a minute. There's all these, just because what worked for you in that one instance doesn't actually make you an expert, and it's not necessarily going to work for everyone else. So, are you actually able to deal with the challenges that those others are going to face based on your one successful experience? And that's then where the expertise comes in, because you can go, yeah, you know what, that worked here, but that's not going to work there, and I would recommend that you do this instead. And that's definitely where that expertise needs to come in as part of that.
Right, definitely. I love it. And then your final thought there was making sure that you market and niche down into something that you can target or go after. I was thinking earlier about you talking about, helping make healthy meals for children. That's a very niche topic. A lot of people talk about fitness and health, and people talk about making healthy meals, but tailoring it to children takes it that one step further, where you're really going to have a more invested audience, because parents or schools or whoever you're teaching this to who needs to learn this is going to raise their hand and say, yes, this is for me.
Yeah, definitely. And in that situation, that client really niche down even further from health eating for children, but then niche down delivering it just to people in daycare or childcare centres, with the idea that eventually, once they got that market nailed, then they could expand and then would create programs that are then going to teach the parents. But the children are already eating the healthy food during the day, so then it would be an easier step for the parents to go, okay, well, this is what my kids are eating during the day, right? And maybe I can learn about what I'm going to do and how I can create some of these meals for my children at home or for breakfast or dinner. While you might go, I'm going to target this niche, it's not necessarily where you have to stay, but certainly it gives you the focus that you need in the initial piece. And then once you've got that working and stuff, then you can look at, okay, is there another market? Can we, make a slight change and move into a different niche or different market with our expertise and passion?
Hello, course creators. Are you struggling with marketing and selling your online course? If so, then head over to our free community where successful course creators are ready to help you create, market, and sell your expertise. Go to onlinecourseigniter.com/community now to join. That's onlinecourseigniter.com/community. One of the main things I wanted to talk with you today is about creating some sort of model or some sort of framework. And when you messaged me, when I read this, it really clicked, because I forget the exact message, but you said something along the lines of, we help others create a model so that the student has something to attach themselves to. I think this is really important because frameworks are a great way to have people visualize what they're going to be learning. And when you have a 4-step process, a 7-step process, or you can illustrate what that process looks like, it becomes easier to explain, it becomes more memorable, and it becomes timely. So, if you could just kind of give us a little explanation on how do you go about finding this information, and then how do you create that model or that framework for the educator?
Yeah, so we've actually been quite lucky. This is something that we were working on and trying to sort of come up with, and then I came across someone here in Australia that had already developed a program. So they've got a program called the Think Wrapped system, and we're now certified to deliver that system and basically packaging into our offering with our clients. But basically, what we're doing is we start off with, and we're taking people through basically just asking lots and lots of questions, unpacking their intellectual property, getting the knowledge out of their head, but structuring it into a couple of visual models. And the first visual model we talk about is the results model. And that is really where we're looking at a couple of things. It could be like a hero's journey. If we're looking at someone that's maybe a small to medium business, we have what we call a matrix model where, there's sort of two factors that can impact on how successful they are. But basically what we're looking at with that results model is looking at, well, where's the pinnacle of where they want to be? What's the journey that they've been on, and what are the problems or the steps along the way? And we can then use that to sort of tell a bit of a story. So you might go, for example, we could develop a hero's journey for the course creator where they've gone, okay, yes, I've come up with an idea for a course and I grabbed the platform and I started to put content in it, but then it really wasn't working. And then, so what were the problems they had? Well, the problems were the marketing, and then obviously I found someone like Matthew or Jeremy that were able to help me to put it together into a great format, and now successful course creator. So that's the first part. So we can actually then use this as a bit of a journey. So it's not necessarily used in the course creation piece, but certainly it's used in the marketing piece. So then we can actually go, people can look at that and go, oh yes, that's where I am in that journey. And we start to develop some emotional connections with things, because it's, with that visual model, they can look at it and go, yeah, that's where I'm at, as opposed to just reading a whole lot of text. Then we look at unpacking what we call the answers model. And it's going, what are the things you need to have in place to be able to be successful in what you're doing? For us, in our thing is, well, you need to have client clarity. You need to, you need to have a signature solution that's there. You need to have your systems in place. You need to have your tools and technology. So these are all the different things that you need to have in place, and that's the answers model. And then we put in place what we call our process model, and this really becomes the foundation for your course. And the process model could be a 5 or 7 steps that says, okay, well, what do we do? First thing is we know we do step 1, then step 2, step 3. And if we do all of those steps, then we're going to get those keys to success in place. We're going to hit the results. And then the fourth one is then our target model, which really talks about the benefits that people have. So, for example, with our target model, we're saying, if you work with us, we're going to help you move. We talk about the blue ocean, red oceans, where you're fighting with sharks in competition. The blue ocean, where you're out there on your own and being seen as your own individual person. And you follow this process, and then you're going to have these benefits, and that's going to be, you're going to have impactful results. You're going to have faster outcomes, and you can have the lifestyle. And so we package all of that up into those 4 visual models. And then we have, obviously, the process model is going, okay, well, these are the 7 steps. Great. Then that's the structure for your course. And then we can actually delve down into each of those steps. And then we can actually look at each of those steps. And again, we can go, is there a model there? So if we're talking about, for example, client clarity, for us, we talk about we've got another model sitting underneath that, which is our persona model, where we're looking at, well, what is the persona of the person? So it's really a matter of just creating those models. And once we've got those models, everything's laid out, it's all unpacked. And then it's so very easy then to go, great, let's create this. We've got all of these different pieces here, and let's start to create a course that's based on those things. And generally would start off with the process model as the key piece to go from there.
Okay. And you are gathering the information for these different models, the results model, the answers model, the process model, and the target model. by asking questions toward that educator. So you have a set of questions that you ask them to pull out the information to fill into these models.
Yeah. Generally, we're just jumping on a Zoom call. We've got a virtual whiteboard, and yeah, we're just asking questions and putting lots of sticky notes up on the board, and doing some brainstorming, and then filtering down those thoughts into So, for example, going process model. What are all the what's all the different things that you do? You do this, I do this, do this. Okay, now let's filter that down. And what does that look like? Okay, you do all these. Can we group that stuff together? So that's step one, is really this piece. Step two is these pieces. And then filter that down as part of that. So it's really, asking a lot of questions, getting them to brainstorm, getting them to basically just unload everything that they're talking about, that they've got in their head, because obviously they've got a level of expertise, but it's really just a matter of pulling that out, and then putting it into these visual models. And the visual models then obviously help to give them some clarity as well, because once they've got it mapped out and they can actually see the process, they can go, yes, that's the steps I do, or hang on, no, there's something missing there, and then we can actually drill down and go, okay, what's missing? Let's put another step in there if need be. Let's refine things. Oh no, that's not quite the right flow. And then once they've got that, then when they're delivering the course, they can show, okay, this is it. These are the steps you're going to follow. And as we were talking before, it's going to give people this clear framework that they can go, okay, this is where I'm at in my journey. I'm on step one. I know now I'm on step three. I'm on step four. And from a visual piece, it allows people to remember things a lot easier. Having that framework to sort of bit of a schema to tie your knowledge to, as opposed to, I've just got to remember these different things. Yeah, so that's the huge benefit of it, and makes it so much easier then to craft the content for the learning experience.
Yeah, it really looks like, I'm sitting here looking at my notes that I've written down here, and it seems like it would give you a very clear roadmap of what you needed to do through each step of the phase, even into the marketing, as you mentioned, because we all know that creating a course is one thing, but marketing it and selling it is a whole nother animal. But it seems like when you lay it out this way and you're thinking about where that customer is in their journey, and what are the results you're getting them, what are the processes you're teaching them, what are the benefits of the course, it feels like it would lay that out in a very succinct order for you to follow as you begin creating your course and creating your marketing plan and so forth.
Definitely, yeah. And that's the huge thing with it, is it's not just about creating the content for your course, but it's also that marketing piece, and having all of these visual tools, again, when you're trying to market it. If you can go, right, this is it, have a look at this, these are the benefits you're going to get, well, this is the results, and people can look at the results model and go, yes, that's where I am on my journey, or yes, they're the benefits I want, or the answers model, and these are the keys to success that I need, and okay, I don't have that, that's why this isn't working. It really helps from a marketing point of view. The other thing as well is that the huge bonuses that we're seeing coming out of this is we're going, okay, well, right, we've got this process model, we've mapped this out, but we've got the results model, we've got the answers model, we've got the process model, we've got the target model. Okay, let's say there's results model. Let's say there's 5 steps in our results model. There's 6 keys to success in our answers model. There's 6 steps in our process model, and maybe 3 steps in our target, or 3 elements in our target model. Then we've actually effectively got 20 individual elements. Now, if you then go, okay, I want to talk about each of those elements individually, and I can find 3 subtopics to talk about those things, then I've actually got 60 pieces of content that I could do. Now, if you go, okay, I just want you to do a 2-minute video on each of those 20 things, then I want you to do a 20-minute video on the 3 subpoints of those 20 things. That's 80 pieces of content that we've got that you've then could craft, and there's all your social media content for a year, as well as your course content, and then if you want to as well, you've already got this roadmap laid out. You can go, okay, right now, that's your framework for a book. You want to write a book. there it is as well. So while we've taken this approach and going, okay, we're looking at it from creating a course, because obviously that's where you're going to have the biggest benefit in terms of, sharing your knowledge, and also, the greater opportunity to create an income. The marketing piece of the social media is an element that's needed to attract attention, to make people problem aware. But then also, creating a book becomes a very valuable, asset that you can also use from a marketing point of view, where you go, okay, right, well, yes, it's sort of that business card on steroids type situation. You got a book. Oh, he's written a book. Okay, so yeah, and then also from the marketing point of view, where if you go to someone and you go, okay, right, I've got a course on sales, or I've got a course on marketing, and then you go to someone else and say, okay, yeah, I've got a course that's going to take you through my 6 steps. My 6 steps to better marketing. These are the results. This is where you go. This is the benefits you're going to get. Well, what one are you going to go with? You're probably going to go with the one that clearly shows you, that's going to connect with you emotionally, because they're going, yes, I've got some key steps. I've got a framework. Okay, this guy's actually really thought about it. He must be an expert in what he's doing, because he's really thought about it, and he's got this. He's got this defined framework, as opposed to some other guy that's or girl that is just going to teach me about marketing, but I'm really not sure about the process that I'm going to follow. I'm really not sure about the journey that I'm going to go on when I'm doing this program, and I'm not sure, how it's going to work, or where it's going to flow. So there's, I suppose, in the back of the mind, and the learner's probably still thinking, where does all this sit? And some of their time is spent thinking all of those things, as opposed to focusing on the key things that you want them to do as part of that experience.
Nice. Yeah, I love it. And it just seems like thinking about the different content, having multiple pieces of content through each one of these models, and each model having, different steps or processes. Sometimes, not sometimes, as we know, it takes multiple touch points for someone to buy into a product or a service or an offer anyways. And so if you are creating all this content, as you said, 3 pieces of content for each process on each model, then one day maybe you're hitting the results piece of content, and someone sees that and say, okay, this is the result I can get. And then the next day you have a process piece of content where they say, okay, this process makes sense. And over time, you are warming that person up to you, to where they'll come to buy to you, because you've gone through and kind of showed them the results, the frameworks, the benefits, and so on.
Yeah, that's it. And because someone might come across one piece of your content, and it might resonate with them, and then they want to sort of scratch the surface, dig a little bit deeper, and see, well, what else is this person saying? And then if you've already got some of those pieces of content, could have been, could be your 20 pieces of each of your model, and then 3 sub steps. These are 80 pieces of content. Now, if you do those as videos, then you can get them transcribed, and then they're blog posts. I'm sure there's probably a few golden nuggets in there that you can probably pull out as little quote cards. If you could do that, and for every sort of video, then you've got then you've got 80 videos, you've got 80 blog posts, you've got 80 quote cards you can post as well. So then you've now gone from 80 to 240 pieces of content. So then when people drill down into this and go, okay, well, this person knows what they're talking about, and it resonates with me and stuff. I want to work with this person. How do I do that? Oh my God, they've got a course. They've got a course that teaches me all of this stuff. Oh my God, I'm so excited. How do I buy? And that's it. And that's the goal. And they're sort of just coming to you and saying, I want to do your course because I like everything that you do, not, okay, hang on, come and sell me. Try and sell me on your course. So then the marketing of it becomes a lot easier. And again, the visual models, connect with the emotions. And as much as we would love to tell ourselves that all our decisions are made logically, the reality is that, about 95% of our decisions are made by our subconscious and emotional brain. But certainly if we can connect with people on an emotional basis, and the visuals help with that.
Yeah, you don't buy a car because of what kind of tires it has. You buy it because of the way it makes you feel when you're driving it, right?
That's right. Yep, that's it. And again, you don't as I say to people, like, people don't want to do your course. They don't want to buy your course. They want an outcome. This great analogy I heard a while ago was, people don't want to buy a drill bit. They want the hole, same sort of thing. They want the outcome that your course provides. But if your course can, through your messaging, through the visual models and stuff, can really articulate to that person and really hit them emotionally and say, this is the outcomes it can provide, then they will want to buy your course for the outcomes.
Yeah, and I've thought that through even more. They don't want the hole, they don't want the drill bit, and they don't want the hole. They want to mount a TV on their wall so that they can sit down with their family and have a nice, movie night or something and enjoy an experience. So that's awesome, man. That's really good stuff. I had more questions to ask you, but we're getting kind of close on time here. So we might have to have you come back on the podcast again and do some more follow-up questions, because I wanted to ask you more about some of your social media and traffic strategies. But it's been awesome having you on here today, and just thinking about those course creators, and I know you've talked to them before, you have experience, and the people who are early on in their journey and who are kind of just starting out or haven't really got there yet. What's some advice that you could offer to someone like that?
Oh, look, I think the big bit of advice is to really, as I said earlier, focus on the problem and stuff. The other bit of advice is, don't worry about the technology. So often we see people that go, I want to build a course. What platform do I choose? And, it's again, that analogy of, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if you start off with a piece of technology, then what you're going to create is really going to be limited by that technology. Put the technology stuff back at, step 4 or 5, really get clear on what it is, what sort of experience you want to create, what is the problems you're solving. Once you've got that, then you can start to think about what is that, what do I need, what are the tools I need to make that happen. Is it a course, is it a membership site, is it is it an information course, is it a masterclass where I'm delivering live sessions or live Q&As in amongst, an online course. Really get clear on all of those things first before you start worrying about the tech type stuff.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate your time today. I thank you for coming on the podcast and speaking some wisdom to everyone out there. And you're a wealth of information. I feel like we could definitely learn a lot more from you. So if people want to find out more about your business and how you can help them online, where can they go to do that?
Best place they can go is our learning platform, signaturesolution.academy. www.signaturesolution.academy. That's where all our courses are. They can jump on there, and from there they can sort of connect with us as well, and see some of that's obviously our online courses that we've got, but also some of our masterclass programs, which are a mix of online courses and supported programs with me or one of our learning designers supporting them as they go through that journey. So that would be the best place to go to get a little bit more around what we do.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure that I link that up in the show notes. So if anyone's listening and wants to go to the show notes and click on those links and check out more about Matthew, I'm sure you'll learn a lot from him. Thanks for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate you, and I just hope you continue on this journey of success going into the future.
Thank you, Jeremy, and look, thanks for putting this podcast together. It's this one and all the other episodes are certainly providing huge amount of value to those people that are in the course creator community. So it's great that you're doing it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Matthew. You can find out more about him and his business by visiting superblearning.com.au, or you can get the show notes of this episode along with links and resources by visiting onlinecourseigniter.com/56. See you all next week for another exciting episode. Thank you for tuning in to the Online Course Igniter podcast. Make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening so that you don't miss an episode. If you would like to learn more marketing strategies and how to sell your online course, then also check out our free community where we share tips, tricks, and tutorials at onlinecourseigniter.com/community.